Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. Since last Thanksgiving, nearly 200 cows disappeared from one county in Colorado, and authorities have no idea what happened to them. Now, some people believe that it could be some modern-day cattle rustlers, but they're not sure because the terrain the rugged terrain where these animals were grazing, it would be really difficult, actually impossible, for someone to bring in trucks to haul these animals away, steal them like that. So nobody really knows. It's still being investigated. It's a cold case at this point. A lot of different ranches were affected, and of course, in this case is different than your cattle mutilation cases because and according to this Washington Post article from last week, there's no carcasses are being found. The cows are just missing. They're gone. Nobody knows where they went. Now, most of the times I talk about cattle mutilation cases, of course, I believe that aliens are responsible. Now, this is a different case. This is a strange case, but there's no bodies being found. They're just gone. Is it possible that the aliens realize that a lot of people are catching on to their little scheme, and they decide, you know what, maybe we better stop leaving the carcasses here, and we'll take them someplace else, someplace where we'll never find them. We'll dump them in a volcano or something. Who knows? But here's the thing, though. I guess the bottom line is this, is because we know for a fact now that there are aliens, there's some sort of non-human intelligence among us, right? Because we know this, because a lot of us do. I know some people don't want to accept it, and that's okay. They don't have to. But the rest of us, the people who live in reality, we can accept it. We know. It's possible, because right now law enforcement doesn't know who's responsible, and they think, oh well, it could be, maybe it's predators or something, or and maybe it's cattle rustlers somehow, but they don't know. They're still investigating it, and I'm here to tell you that I think it's possible that aliens could be responsible for this. That's what I think, and at this point, because there is actually nothing, they have really no leads apparently. That's a viable, valid explanation. I think that's something that needs to be stated. Unfortunately. Now, apparently, according to this Post article, the Montrose County Sheriff's Department in Colorado, they've been investigating the disappearance of 187 bovines, mostly of them calves too, which is weird. And also, another weird aspect of this story is the fact that the mothers aren't acting like anything's wrong, and if usually when they lose their calves, they're like freaking out. Not in this case, according to the article. So I find that strange. So we just don't know. I'm just saying at this point in time, I'm not saying this is, the absolute reason, right, for the disappearance. I'm just saying that alien abduction of these cattle is possible. I don't know, but I think it's something that needs to be considered. Now, this article only mentions alien abduction once, but they were grazing in this really rugged terrain, the Uncompahgre Plateau, and the authorities believe it could be just cattle rustlers. But again, I don't know. I say a viable, valid explanation is that it's aliens, and you're never going to find them, and these people are just out of luck. These ranchers that lost these cows, it's a lot of money that they're talking about too. They're gone, and there's no explanation for it. Anyway, let's read a little bit of this article, and then we'll talk about it as we go through it. The headline reads, "Nearly 200 cows disappeared. The case remains cold." It says here, and this was the date line is Olathe, Colorado. The first report was filed just before Thanksgiving. 29 cows and calves, a rancher told a state agriculture official, hadn't come home. 1 week later, 3 more reports from 3 other owners, 46, 38, and 31 head of cattle, all gone. 3 days after that, rancher Kelly Birch also alerted authorities. She had counted her herd and come up 43 animals short. "I have this cow, but not this calf," or "I have this calf, but not this cow," said Birch, whose family has run cattle on the same swath of public land for 106 years. "Something's not adding up here." All 187 missing bovines had spent the warmer months grazing thousands of acres on the high Uncompahgre Plateau, rugged country where some animals always fall victim to predators, illness, or weather. But never this many, and not without leaving lots of carcasses behind. Also unusual, the vast majority were calves. Ranchers and local authorities suspected they might have a modern-day case of cattle rustling on their hands. The disappearances in the fall set off an unprecedented state investigation spurred by Colorado's governor and involving sheriffs, a multi-agency task force, search planes, a $10,000 reward, and a bull rider turned cowboy who has scouted the area on horseback. The effort cast a spotlight on an enduring way of life in Colorado's more conservative western slope, where cattle bulk up in wild forests and canyon lands before eventually being sold to feed Americans' appetites for burgers and steaks. Months later, with much of the possible crime scene still blanketed in snow, the case remains mostly cold. Lost livestock isn't unheard of in this agricultural area famed for its sweet corn, but nothing of this magnitude at all, said Chuck Searcy, an administrative sergeant for the Montrose County Sheriff's Office, who is leading the investigation. Searcy spent the winter fielding tips about suspicious characters and even theories about alien abduction. He has also ruled out insurance fraud. He is convinced it's at least partially a theft case, probably carried out by someone deeply familiar with the area and knowledgeable about the industry. Say you get a little heifer calf and you breed her and she has 5 babies for you, Searcy said. Now what is her value? A lot, officials note. Well, let's just stop for a second. Now, obviously, yes. Could this be cattle rustlers, some modern-day cattle rustlers who figured out a way to traverse the rugged terrain with some vehicles or something to steal these calves? Of course it could be. But at this point in time, months and months of investigating this, the Montrose County Sheriff's Department, that nobody knows they have no leads. They don't know what's going on. They still don't know. So with that in mind, that means maybe it's something else. Maybe it's not cattle rustlers. It could be. Maybe it's extraterrestrial / non-human intelligence cattle rustlers. Maybe that's what it is. Of course, they don't really talk about that in here. Of course, I'm going to talk about it because you know how I am. But yeah, I think it's something that needs to be, we need to talk about this because it could be. It could actually be aliens and responsible for these disappearances. Now, I know, here's the thing. Most of the time, I talk about a lot of different cattle mutilation cases on this show. Now, this case is different. There's no bodies. They're not finding them. So I'm wondering, maybe the aliens realize that, hey, they're starting to catch on after all these decades that we might be responsible for this. So maybe we better do something different this time. Maybe we'll just take the carcasses with us instead of leaving them behind. Maybe we'll just steal them. They'll think it's something else then. They'll think it's some of their own who are responsible for these disappearances. Could be. I mean, because as you read this article, you find out that this is this kind of thing just doesn't happen to this degree, that this many animals go missing in just one little area of well, it's not a little area, it's a large area, but one county, right? Basically, since Thanksgiving, 200 cows just disappear like that with no trace, basically. For the most part. I mean, there were some that were found by somebody, according to the article, not many, but 187 just gone. Anyway, the article continues here. It says, drought and other pressures have caused the United States herd to steadily shrink since 2019, while consumer demand for beef is at a near record high. The combination has cattle prices soaring. At market, the 187 missing cattle could fetch $400,000, maybe even more. It says here, even so, the particulars are puzzling. No semi-trailer could reach the hard scrabble, unpaved altitude where these cattle were spread, the kind of range even experienced ranch hands don't know by heart. Typically, mother cows separated from their calves would show distress. A mass die-off, perhaps from poison weed, would produce bodies. It's a mystery, said Janie Van Winkle, a former Colorado Cattlemen's Association president whose herd grazes north of here, a big one. The missing animals were reported to local brand inspectors who play a key role in Colorado, known as a brand state. Well, we're going to fast forward here through this article a little bit. It says here, Colorado's inspectors also investigate possible thefts, which began to spike in 2022. Last year, 475 cattle were reported missing or stolen in 57 cases, but prosecutions have often taken a back seat to crimes against humans. The time is a new game, Ingley said. Ingley is he's the brand commissioner. Todd Ingley, he's the brand commissioner. It includes the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, officials from the Federal Bureau of Land Management and the United States Forest Service, state police, local law enforcement, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife, which dispatched a plane in search of cows or clues. Yeah, they don't really have any clues. There's nothing. For the cattle rancher Birch, she said that her 400 head herd departs her Old Eighth Ranch in early June for the 80,000 acre allotment of her federal grazing permit. The cows are always eager, she said. They line up at her southern gate, ready to trudge 20 miles up the plateau. Birch and her teenage sons, aided by their cattle dogs and horses, keep loose tabs on the herd all summer, often sleeping in a nearby wooden cabin built by her ancestors in 1939. When the first snowflakes fall, she said, the cows know it's time to go home. As she and the other ranchers do every year, Birch chartered a helicopter in early December to fly over the terrain and peer down into dark canyons for stragglers. She and her older son spotted just one elk and one coyote. Bears might have gotten some of her missing cattle, but she suspects many were lost to thieves who plucked off a few one night and a few another. Whatever the explanation, it was a kick in the gut. Birch sells animals each January, bringing in her sole annual paycheck. This year it was 20% to 30% smaller, she said. Her insurance policy does not cover theft or disappearance. So look, isn't that sad? These I wonder at some point in the future if we're going to have insurance for cattle that are stolen by aliens. They should start offering that. Maybe they never will, but they should. Because I think that's one of the possibilities here. It's a valid, viable explanation. I know a lot of people don't want to say that at this point, and I'm not saying that's what it is for sure. I'm just saying that at this point in time, it should be considered. It should be a consideration that it's not some people responsible for this that are stealing them. It's not predators. Obviously, they can't even find the carcasses. So what is it? If they can't find, I mean, they haven't made any determination what it is yet. So all of this stuff should be on the table at this point. I mean, in this case, unlike the cattle mutilation cases that we talk about a lot on this channel, this time they're all just disappeared, gone. Because the article doesn't talk about a lot of carcasses being found whatsoever. It doesn't talk about any mutilated cows, unless there's information that the Washington Post decided to withhold from this article. I don't know about that, but it's not stated in here that anything was mutilated. Found mutilated, just gone. But again, I think that it could be possible that aliens are behind this. And maybe they are. Maybe what could be the explanation here that they're just, in some instances where animals completely vanish, maybe the aliens are taking them someplace else, taking the carcasses someplace else after they mutilate them, where nobody's ever going to find them, because maybe the aliens are like, you know what, they're catching on. Maybe we better take them someplace else. They're starting to talk. We've been talking for decades, actually. But maybe they're finally realizing that, hey, we've been a little laissez-faire here over the decades. Maybe we need to change the way we do this. Maybe we need to we'll mutilate them. We'll continue our program, but we're going to take the bodies with us, and we'll take them someplace where nobody will ever find them. Maybe dump them in a volcano, like has been suggested by some people. I don't know. Now, like I said, there were some cattle that were found, but at the same time, 187 in this one area, basically, in this one plateau. I mean, it's a large area, but still, according to the officials that are investigating this is unheard of. This is something like this to this level. This is not something that they're used to, and they still, to this point, months and months later, they have no idea who's responsible. But I'm here to tell you, it could be extraterrestrials. It could be non-human intelligence. That's the whole point of the reason I wanted to talk about this today. Anyhow. Now I want to move on to something else. Now, of course, for a while now, my favorite discussion item has been the case involving the Las Vegas aliens, because I believe it's the biggest story of all time, because it's the only one that proves without a doubt, that we are not alone, because the totality of the evidence informs us that this is the case, that there's no denying it anymore, right? There's just no denying it. In fact, I just want to point this out before I move on here, as I was in communication with Scott Roeder this week, actually yesterday, and he has come up with a new, very, very interesting hypothesis about how the aliens are able to cloak themselves, and not just the aliens, but how they cloak themselves and the craft. And he did a report on late last year. He did a report on on his findings with regards to this case, and now he's going to update that report, and he's going to come on the show here pretty soon to talk about his new hypothesis regarding how they're able to cloak. And he went over this with me yesterday on the phone, and he's going to come on the show one of these days. He's going to provide his new hypothesis in writing to me soon, and I'll talk about it on an upcoming show, and he will also appear on an upcoming show to talk about it as well. And it's very exciting. However, I want to just say this. The other day I was watching a YouTube video on a channel called Beyond Creepy, and there was an episode, just a new episode, where it was talking about a case from 1970 that occurred in New Jersey. And I'm sitting there watching this video, listening to it, and I'm thinking, boy, this is very, very similar to what happened in Las Vegas. Like, the only problem was, in this case, from this 1970 case, they didn't have a camera with them. They tried to get a camera. They actually, there was two teenage kids that were near a school playing around at night, and they saw UFOs and an alien creature, according to this Beyond Creepy video that I watched. And I did find the source. So he did list the source. It was actually from the National UFO Reporting Center, and I found the report on this, and that's what I'm going to pull up here on the screen right now. And it's very similar, very similar. Some of the things that happen here, very, very similar to what happened in Vegas. And so we'll go through this story here. I find it fascinating. And this happened in Somerville, New Jersey, according to this report from the National UFO Reporting Center. And it involved a couple of UFOs. And I believe the circumstances, this is what's interesting about this story. To me, a lot of the things that was reported in this. And now this was filed, this person actually filed a report twice. This is the updated version. It was actually put in here on 2018. But it was for an event that occurred in 1970. And it was in Somerville, New Jersey. Anyway, let's go through this. It says here, what do you do with a guy from another planet? This is my UFO story. I've told it through the years, usually starting with, had I had a camera, I could have made a movie. Now, the person doesn't list his name. He doesn't use his real name here. It just doesn't say who he is. He wants to remain anonymous. And also, there was a friend with him who has since passed away, who was also a teenager at the time, and his name's not mentioned here either. But it says here, it started with my best friend, male name deleted. We'll just call him Butch, his friend Butch. And I returning to his house after having worked at his stepfather's gas station. I was 15. It was November of 1970, I believe. Upon exiting the car with Butch and his family, his stepfather, mother, sister, and brother, we were all startled by a flash of light like a photo being taken. We each thought it had come from a different direction. Not thinking too much of it, Butch and I decided to go to a nearby middle school to swing on the flagpole rope just for something to do. After a few turns, we both stopped to rest at the base of the flagpole, which was directly in the front of the school that was facing a busy two-way road. Sitting back parallel to the school front, we both saw an arching blue light over the tops of the trees showing above the school from behind it. We both immediately said the same thing. What was that? So we decided to investigate, making our way around the right side of the school via a blacktop road that went to the back playground area. As we started around the rear corner, we were met with a loud radio-like sound that grew very loud. We backed up to the front of the school until it faded away. We then again made our way around to the back, positioning ourselves against the brick wall of the rear. The back of the schoolyard was situated with an expanse of green grass that extended about 150 yards to the edge of the woods. The blacktop we were on went about 20 yards to the lawn's edge with a basketball hoop and a street light at the edge. This was occurring at night, so the street light made seeing the tree line a little difficult. But as we watched, we could see a figure moving from the path in the woods to the left. When we yelled to ask who it was, it stopped, didn't say anything, and then continued on. We then saw the figure move back to the right and go back into the path. Then at one point we saw two figures moving in opposite directions along the tree line, both stopping when we yelled and then moving again. At this point we were wondering who was going through the woods when we saw a UFO come from our right above the woods, stopping to the left side of the wooded area at the back of the field. It stopped and hovered above the wood and then moved silently toward our left rear. Then we saw another follow the same route. When I looked to my 2 o'clock, which was in the direction of downtown Somerville, I could see a distinct ceiling of clouds that were reflecting the light from the downtown business area. It lit the bottom of the clouds, creating a clear line of sight below them. I could could then see one and then two of the UFOs moving between these clouds and the below skyline. They moved slowly and silently toward us and the woods. They would each stop briefly and then again circle back and to our left. While watching this sequence, counting 4 or 5 UFOs, unless we double counted them, one of the UFOs, after stopping above the wooded area and at which point it should have moved out to our left rear, moved slowly and directly toward Butch and me. All the while, Butch and I were confirming that we were both witnessing the same things as they occurred. The UFO made its way toward us, not making a sound, until it stopped just above us. It was approximately 40 to 50 feet above us and to our front. It stopped there. We could make out the webbing on the portals or windows, and with confirming with Butch, we both realized it was observing us. It stayed there for what seemed like a full minute or so, and then slowly moved up and again to our rear left shoulder, continuing its pattern. At this point, having been frightened out of our wits, it occurred to me that we should get other witnesses. We saw the house to the west, just beyond the gate at that side of the blacktop. We went to the door, knocked, and nobody was there, unfortunately, when they knocked on the door. Then they decided to go get a camera at Butch's house. When we arrived at Butch's house, we searched for a camera and couldn't find one that Butch said that he had. Instead, all we could find was a pair of binoculars that happened to be there. It was a cold November, and he needed to borrow a jacket, so Butch lent me his father's biker leather jacket. We made our way back and put ourselves with our backs against the brick wall of the school and waited to see what was still happening. We were there for a few minutes and didn't see anything, so we decided to move forward toward the grass field and get closer to the tree line, 150 yards or so from the edge of the blacktop. As we moved forward, Butch let out a shout. "Did you see that?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. I asked him about what he'd seen, and he said, "That guy was running, and he stopped as soon as I shouted." Apparently, whatever it was had been running inside the thin woods to the east and our left, and had come into view as we cleared the L-shaped part of the school building. At first, when I looked, I didn't see any movement. As we moved toward the object, it appeared to me, and I said to Butch to be light from a window shining from the wooded area. It was a light orange-white color with thin saplings and a tall grass in front of it. Butch insisted that it had been running right up to the second he shouted. So we moved up to about 15 feet from it, and I could make out a figure. It appeared to be a tall, thin man with a large head, a black stripe where the nose was, and a black slit for a mouth. He appeared to be crouched as if to leap in any direction. I tried to discern if what I was seeing was my imagination and still just light from a window. We then remembered the binoculars we had, so looking up directly at him with the binoculars, it was as if someone had punched me in the eyes. I looked directly into his face. He wasn't looking directly at me. I looked him over and saw that he had a square black something on his chest. He appeared to be wearing something with a collar similar to our astronauts' suits. After half a minute, I decided to try to get his attention. I yelled out, "Hey!" loudly. He very quickly turned his face and looked directly at me. Again, it was as if someone had punched me in the eyes. Butch asked to look, and as he raised the glasses to his eyes, he let out a "ooh" sound and pulled the binoculars from his eyes. Butch gave the glasses back to me, and we watched for a few minutes. I then said something that embarrassed me. "We mean you no harm." I felt silly after saying that and didn't try to communicate it again. After a time, we started hearing a coughing sound coming from him. I'm seeing a lot of these things. I just want to stop here for a second before I finish this story, because I want to go through it, compare it with some of the things that happened with the Vegas case, right? Because a lot of the things that are happening in this case are very similar to the Vegas case. This guy, back in 2018, 5 years, he put this on actually the first time he reported it was back in 2012, I think, on the National UFO Reporting Center, and then he did an update. He redid he put out a better version of his experience on here, and what I find interesting is that this was years before the Vegas case, which happened in 2023, and a lot of the things that happened in this story very similar to what happened with Vegas, and we'll go through them when I get through with this article here. Anyway, where was I? After a time, we started hearing a coughing sound coming from him. I suggested that he might be having trouble breathing. As I watched him, he slowly started to move away from us when a dog from the other side of the woods started barking. He returned to his crouching middle position. I don't know why, but at this point I suggested to Butch that we leave him alone. Butch agreed, so we turned and started back to our position on the schoolhouse wall. As we made our way around the L and the alien was out of view like a B-grade movie, a police car pulled around the corner of the school and drove up to us. There were 2 officers in the car. Of course, they wanted to know what we were doing in the back of the school at night. We tried to tell them that there was a guy from another planet, again feeling ridiculous, around the corner, but they decided to check out our pockets. Unknown to me was that in Butch's father's jacket, which had very deep pockets, were many books of matches. Great, now we looked like we were up to something with fire. But they believed me when I told them it was a borrowed jacket. They then wanted to know what we were talking about. We said we'd show them, so they followed us in their car as we walked back around the L-shaped wing to the east, and as we did, I said to Butch, now you know he's not going to be there. It just felt like that would be in keeping with the impossibility of everything else that had occurred. Sure enough, he was gone. So doesn't that sound, just like how it would happen? You're seeing something and then the cops show up and you try to show the cops and there's nothing there. Very similar to the Vegas case in a way. By the time the cops showed up at Vegas, nothing was there, of course. But unfortunately for these guys, they didn't have the camera. They couldn't find a camera. But anyway, I digress. Sure enough, he was gone. The officers got out of their car, and I described to them what happened. One scoffed and said we were high or something, but the one next to me swallowed in the classic gulping way you do when you're scared. They got back in their car, drove into the field, shining their light on the thin wooded area briefly, and turned around and yelled for us to get out of the area and drove off. We then left as told. To this day, I often think of what may have happened had we lingered for no more than 2 minutes more with the alien. The police would have continued to our position and been witnesses with us. No telling what would have happened at that point. It truly haunts me to this day. Butch died last year. In the very infrequent contact we had over the years, we always included our memory of that night. For a time right afterward, I experienced what I now know as PTSD. Butch was a good drawer and drew the alien in school one day, and it sent me back into a brief shock. Later that year, to make legitimacy even more strange, the National Enquirer was offering $10,000 for photographic proof of UFOs. On the cover of one of their issues, taking up the right edge top to bottom, was our guy. Perfectly him. I have since tried to get a copy of it but can't find it. I think it may be in the Library of Congress, but it isn't available online as yet. I hope to get a copy and frame it and hang it in my office. He was apparently at the time the most often seen alien. Butch and I at the time knew that as time went on, we would ourselves start to doubt what happened. But it did. I often wish I could write it off as to imagination or something else, but it happened. That's my story. Not many people I know have had an alien trapped or at least restricted and then inexplicably let go. I would have done things differently today, but perhaps that wouldn't work out as well as it did. But had I understood the gravity of what was happening, I certainly would have tried something differently. Just another thing that haunts me. By the way, I have blah blah blah. He has since got his bachelor's in psychology, and he's a devout Christian. And he has no desire to deceive or mislead anyone. This is the absolute truth. So, now, a lot of these, the stuff that's reported in this story here are very similar to me, in my mind, to what happened with the Vegas case. I mean, when you think about this, okay, in the Vegas case, as we learned, we investigated that case, of course, there was information from the American Meteor Society on the night that object fell down from the sky in Las Vegas in 2023, on April 30th, 2023. We're almost at, the 2-year anniversary now of the incident occurring. On that night, the object was seen from 4 states falling from the sky, a blue and green object. A lot of people were saying it was a meteor. Obviously, it could not have been a meteor because, for one thing, under infrared, the object was filmed from various different vantage points by on police body cameras, on ring cameras, on car under and one camera in a car had captured it using infrared, and you couldn't see it. Under infrared, the object was invisible. And actually, when Scott Roeder, when I talk about his new hypothesis, he has an explanation for that. It's very interesting. But on infrared, that object it showed no heat signature as it was coming down, and it was invisible. It didn't show up. You couldn't see it because it had no heat signature. And I think that the hypothesis that I had come up with I guess last year or a year and a half ago. I don't know. I've been talking about this case for almost 2 years now, and it was last year when we finally were able to determine that it absolutely, no question about it, occurred, and that there were actual aliens in the yard. My hypothesis was that object. It came down from the sky. It needed to make an emergency landing because something had gone wrong with the craft, right? And according to Scott Roeder, the reason why people could see it, this is why we were able to see that object coming down from the sky, because he thinks that this is a great hypothesis, because it was malfunctioning, right? The object was coming down from the sky, falling from the sky, it was malfunctioning, and people could see it from 4 different states, right? And the reason you couldn't, the infrared camera couldn't see it, because there was no heat signature. It was cold. Something was going wrong, and but the reason you could see it then was because their cloaking. The reason you could see it with the naked eye, because their cloaking wasn't working. Had the cloaking been working, right, then you wouldn't have seen it with your naked eye. However, the infrared camera would have seen it. That's what's going on here. I'm going to get into that in a different episode with Scott Roeder when he discusses his hypothesis about how these creatures are using, how they're able to cloak themselves. But that is it makes sense. But anyway, this case is like the Vegas case, because I think it might have been the same kind of situation. What I think might have happened here, right, with this 1970 case in Somerville, New Jersey, is that this object came down from the sky. Something came down from the sky. They actually said they saw a flash. All these people were getting out of a car, right? At first, that's how this whole incident started. They saw a flash. Like something, they didn't know where it was coming from, like something happened, right? And then this guy and his buddy Butch, they go to the school and they're playing around, horsing around, and then they see UFOs. And that, to me, that's very similar to the Vegas case, because in the Vegas case, the American Meteor Society, a lot of people had contacted them to talk about what they saw. A lot of people thought it was a meteor that was falling down. In fact, there was a woman from Arizona, I talk about this a lot, who saw this, who was south of Vegas, of course, Arizona, south of Vegas, and she was looking north, and she saw this object go down, and she reported to the American Meteor Society that after this object went down, 2 UFOs showed up, and they were moving around back and forth, like as if they were over the same area where that object went down, and it lasted for about an hour. And I hypothesized that what happened, that object that went down was something went wrong, and those UFOs that showed up were that was the cavalry to get the aliens that dropped on the ground out of there. That was my hypothesis. That was my hypothesis, and I think that's what might have happened in this 1970 case. Those people said they saw a flash of light. That's how this whole thing started. And then they go, it was near the school. There was woods near this school that they're talking about, where they're horsing around, and they're looking through into the woods, and they're seeing UFOs. They see figures in the woods moving back and forth. These tall creatures, right? They weren't human, right? They see them moving back and forth in the woods, and then next thing you know, they see UFOs, a couple of UFOs. So what might have happened there might be the same thing that happened in Vegas. That's something went wrong with the craft that they were in, and then the cavalry had to come and get them out of there, and those 2 teenagers just happened to be there at that time, and were witnessing this, and it took some time for these UFOs to take care of business, and by the time the cops showed up, just like in the Vegas case, everything was gone. And these were tall aliens too. They were talking about tall aliens, just like what we see in Vegas. So this kind of stuff might happen every now and then. It seems like it happened. I didn't think that anything like this ever happened before, just like the Vegas case. But now we have a story here which is very similar to the Vegas case, and it needs to, and this story was, this guy published this on the National UFO Reporting Center. His story was published on there long before the Vegas case even occurred. And the Vegas case we know happened because all of the people involved in it. There was all the witnesses that saw the object coming down, right? There was all the people, the Kenmore family that saw the object landing in their, or making the hard landing in their yard. And then you had them dealing with seeing aliens in the backyard. It's very similar to this story. And the only difference here is that here these kids saw other UFOs hovering around above the treetops, right? In the Vegas case, those people did not see the UFOs. Only someone from Arizona did, looking north toward Nevada, saw UFOs. But to me, it sounds very, very similar. I think what might have happened in this 1970 case, it might be the same kind of situation that happened in 2023 in Las Vegas. And basically, that's same situation that we're talking about here is what seems to happen sometimes is sometimes alien craft do crash. Sometimes aliens get killed. Sometimes the government intervenes and takes away all the evidence and doesn't tell anyone. And then sometimes, very, very rarely, very extremely rarely, sometimes something goes wrong with these alien crafts. They come down, sometimes in people's backyards, sometimes near the school at at nighttime, right? Because something goes wrong, and then UFOs show up, and helpers show up for other extraterrestrials. Know this happened. Knows that these other aliens need to be brought home, right? And they need to tow out the craft if there is one, anything left. Or I'm sure that's what I think that's a possibility in the Vegas case, and it might have been a possibility in this case. I mean, both cases are very similar. Even and also think of this, in the Vegas case, Angel talked about when he came confronted one of these creatures initially, after the object came down in the yard, and then he confronted one of these creatures. He heard it sounded like it was growling. He saw it was 8 to 10 foot tall creature was in front of him all of a sudden, right? And he was paralyzed temporarily, and he heard what it sounded like growling. In this story from 1970, it sounded like cough. According to the witness, it sounded like coughing, right? And the breathing, but then he said when he wasn't coughing was just maybe having trouble breathing. These could be very similar situations. And then the funniest part, the ironic part, is that police are involved in both of these cases, right? Police showed up in the 1970 case. Police showed up in the 2023 case, and in both instances, it seems apparently the aliens were gone, or at least hidden away from the police and also the witnesses, because it doesn't seem like the creatures were there when the police showed up, or they're hidden a lot better than they were initially when the craft first crashed. So these two cases are very similar, and this really helps strengthen the Las Vegas case even further. I just want to point that out. When I was listening to this the other day on that Beyond Creepy YouTube channel, which I will leave the link for that one so you could check it out. I was thinking, wow, a lot of this stuff sounds very similar to what happened in Vegas. And the other part about it is there were police that show up in Vegas, as we know. We have the video. We see the police there. The police believed them. In this case, one of the police officers was, dismissive, but another one was gulping, and they believed them. They didn't think these kids were lying. Very similar, very similar. So I thought that was very interesting, and I wanted to share that with you guys. Anyway, I just want to say this. I'm going to say thank you all for joining me. Until next time.